So where am I going this week? Well, I've headed west, and I find myself in a very wild and windswept Connemara. My guest this week has made Galway her home, but it's a far-flung place for where this lady was born. Her name? She's Orfhlaith Foyle.
I was born in Nigeria and I've lived in Africa. My sisters and my brother, only one, have lived in Africa. It was my mother, actually. She thought it would be nice to kind of go somewhere different and do something different. And they ended up in Enugu in Nigeria. I was born there and I don't remember much of Nigeria at all. Only what my parents told me. It was considered the hottest place next to hell. I remember Kenya more than Nigeria. Kenya, I think, is one of the most exquisitely beautiful countries in the world. I adore it. We lived in a place called Gandu, which was about 90 miles from Nairobi, and it was on the foothills of Mount Kenya. And my parents taught in a girls' school, and we lived in the compound. It's called Gandu National Girls' School, and it was run by Italian nuns. And we loved the nuns. They were Italian. They loved us. They used to pinch our cheeks really hard, and they were lovely women.
Did you see yourself as being different, or were you just the same as everybody else as far as you were concerned as a little girl?
Well, as far as we were concerned, we were just like anybody else. We were the only white kids on the compound, so our friends were Asian and African. Basically, we were brought up to believe no difference. And that's not to say that we didn't see a difference in how other people treated Africans or Asians. And then later on, when we were living in Malawi, we noticed a great difference. Even though Malawi was run by Kamuzu, who he was a dictator for life, and the country was run in his lines. The terrible thing in his country, it was safer to be white than it was to be black, because if you said anything against his government, or his non-government, because he was the law, if you're white, you survived in a way that you were told to leave the country. You were taken out of the country, and if you were black, you disappeared. We lived in a place called Zomba, and you'd come into school at 7:30 in the morning because it got so hot. You only have school until 12 o'clock that night. That day. And you'd look up to the left and you'd see this huge wired off compound, and you knew that's where people were kept, but you never saw them. But you saw the secret police. The head of the secret police used to go around in his Land Rover with his son, and we used to go to school with his children. So we all knew that those two children were the ones to avoid. That's when we learned as children that there were certain things you didn't say in this world, certain things you kept to yourself, and that you just didn't speak out. And so I suppose that's where I began to really listen in to conversations. And because when you're a kid, people don't always notice that you're listening in, and you'd hear things about happened to so and so, and friends of ours, their mother was taken. And I remember talking to her daughter one day and asked her, just because I was so young and because it was quite beyond my experience, have you ever seen her? How long have you seen her? And she said, how long has it been since you've seen her? And she says, I don't get to see her. And I can remember we were sitting in her sitting room, in her parents' sitting room, and we were sitting on this sofa, and we were both just kind of sitting there, and and she was a bit older than me, I think, and I thought, and at that age, you don't think much, you don't think beyond the moment. But I can remember getting very quiet, thinking, I had my mum, and she didn't have hers, and it was because men came and took her mum away. One day, I was at home, and I can remember watching my brother coming back down the laneway, or the little kind of dirt roadway from the main convent building down to where our house was on the compound. And he was in a terrible state, and my mom said to him, what's wrong? And he said, it turned out the nun chopped the head off a chicken, and he was up there, and he couldn't believe it. This chicken was flapping around the place, blood spraying everywhere, and his legs were going. And he was stunned out of his mind. He screamed, I think, and ran. He came back down. He was really, really upset. But also he was very excited because he told us, and we were delighted with this. We thought it's brilliant. Nuns with axes, so of course we ran back up to have a look, So we were trying to equate these nuns that we knew who were like married to God, and we saw them every Sunday at Mass, and they always had their prayers, and yet one of them picked up an axe and murdered a chicken, and we were thought, oh, this is just wonderful. It fed something in me I'm not saying a thirst for that kind of violence. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it's like it's life. I actually hated school, always hated it. And I was always very good. I was really good. And I don't mean that in any kind of like sad, poor me, miserable way. It was just the fact that I knew how to behave, because that's drummed into you. And I don't think it's like that in school anymore. But in those days, it was quite strict, and you'd get hit on the hand and everything like that. Not so much in Africa, but definitely in Ireland. And then, of course, I was sent to boarding school. I was 7 years of age, and I was sent to boarding school from there. I enjoyed myself for 3 semesters, and then I just wrote a letter home begging my parents to take me back because I couldn't stand the place. But I didn't realise the nuns read your letters. And I kind of knew that, so I sent an extra letter to my sister who had just been born, thinking, no, the nuns will never read that one. But anyway, 6 weeks later, my father turned up at the door and said, come on, we're going. And I was sent home with my brother Mike to Ireland, and that was it.
Africa had taught Orla many valuable lessons about life. She learnt to be a silent observer, that life around her had a duality, good and bad, happy and good, dark and light. But she also figured out that she really hated school. Equipped already at such a young age with such wisdom, Orla arrived in Ireland, where those lessons became more compounded for her.
We were sent to live in Athlone with my grandparents. It was very different because, of course, you had the first difference, which is the weather. Then you had the second difference, which everybody was white. And then the third difference was that people treated you as if you were people treated us as if we were English. We had English accents. Got bullied in school for that, big time, and you tried to lose it. I couldn't lose it. Tried my damnedest to lose it, and I could not lose it.
But I suppose I just have a real sense of sadness of for a little girl trying to lose her accent so she'll be treated differently. It sounds so sad.
My grandmother said I used to come home crying my eyes out because, I got bullied, being, the usual crap. Even though I'm a quiet enough person, I've always been a bit rebellious underneath, closet rebel. And I think that's why I write the way I write, because I didn't have what I wouldn't call it backbone, but I didn't have the temerity or the guts to kind of stand up for myself in certain situations. So I saved it all and I kept it for my writing. And I still do that to a certain extent in my life. I consider it fuel. We got on very well, my granddad and I, and we had a brilliant relationship, even though he had a terrible temper. He had polio. He got it when he was very young, and I remember my mum saying to me that he had to put up with an awful lot of people saying it was almost like he'd been visited by a bad spirit, or he did something bad, therefore this is why he got polio. And I'm not saying that we didn't come across that kind of thinking in Africa, but it was because we were so used to different people. We were used to Italians, we were used to French, we were used to English, we were used to African, we were used to academic lifestyle in some ways, and the missionary lifestyle, and we were used to all of this, and then to come back to a country that that things were so closed off, I thought, and people had very closed off faces. What I could not get over was how priests and nuns were treated, because in Africa they were normal people. They wore ordinary clothes. We had friends who were priests and nuns, and they had real conversations with me and with my brother and my sisters. They were very different, Australian, American, French and Italian, very, very different, very urbane in some ways, sophisticated, and just they had seen the world. And I think that's when I kind of got a feeling that, God, I just want to be that kind of a person rather than somebody who just lives in one area. And I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to be, to living in one area, but I think your mind can be a bit more open than your circumstances. So when we came home to Ireland, and then the nuns and the priests dressed in black, and the way you treated them was so completely different. It was the way we were taught now, you don't say anything until you're spoken to. And I can remember being at school and a nun talking about me to my granny over my head. Oh, she's grand, isn't she? She's lovely, da 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 da. And when they did talk to you, it was very patronising. I don't know why it was that my experience of Catholicism was really quite different living in Africa. When I moved back to Ireland, I had no idea of prayers. I'd only the prayers that my parents, when we were growing up, we'd kneel down, say 5 decades of the rosary. And which was good in one way, because it kind of taught you an idea of a sense of something bigger than yourself, which is what I always like.
And when you talk about the frustration and keeping all that angst inside, I mean, okay, it came out in frustration, but how else did it manifest itself? I
became a bit of a loner. Few friends, good friends when I did have them. Major daydreamer, which I think is important if you're a writer. Read constantly, all the time. I loved reading. I loved going out for long walks on my own, which I still do. Then I loved conversations, but I could never find people to have the sort of conversations I wanted. And because I was quite short, which I still am, I stopped growing when I was 17. Anybody who I wanted to have conversations with, it was like even girls who might have been a bit younger than me used to pat me on the head, wouldn't listen. And whereas when I was younger, when I'd been living in Africa, I can remember having conversations with people who were far older than me, who actually listened to what I said. And I think, if you have that as a child and it's taken away from you, God, you miss it, because it's like, people often say like the bridge between children and adults is quite unmanageable at times. But I think if you meet adults who are willing to treat you as a human being when you're a child, that's something that you long for, and you hold on to. And if you lose it, as we kind of did when we left Africa and came back to Ireland, it was such a wrench. I'm very much a sort of person that I really don't like being told. And I don't like being told in a certain way. I don't mind learning from somebody who knows an awful lot more than me. But as long as it's almost like a bargain between us, and sort of like respect as well. And because I was very quiet, people found it easier to kind of lord it over me in some ways. And because I was very quiet too, and I would allow them to, instead of saying, hold on, now you don't treat me like that.
So did Orla find her voice? That voice that she had longed for as a child? The strong, loud, powerful, assertive, irreverent voice? Well, she certainly did. Here she is again.
I did a deal with myself. I said, no matter what, you're going to be a writer, no matter what. And if it means you give up an awful lot, then that's exactly what you do. My mom was the one constant thing. She just said, you're a writer, no matter what. And you can be whatever you want to be, but you're a writer. I mean, I can remember, lying in my bed and I'd be just thinking, what the hell am I doing with my life? Tracing this dream that really has no substance in anybody else's life but mine, or not even in my life. It's mainly in my mind, And these mad stories that come up, and why are you typing, or why are you working on your computer when there's no point of, it's not going to be published. Do you not realise how few books, get through? And then most of them are, well, quite many of it is crap. You know what I mean? And then the ones that do get through, the ones that are good, they don't sell, because nobody really wants to read the sort of stuff that makes you think and look and say, oh, Jesus, there's me. Or, oh my God, imagine feeling that. They'd much prefer have things that lull them into safety and security. Very few people actually want to go onto the plank, the pirate's plank.
I think what's very interesting, your first book, and that was published to a great acclaim altogether, Bellius, I actually came across something and it described it as an angular, funny novel. about two madmen. Now, in a million years, I would never call it a funny novel, because I would have seen it as a very dark, very moody, and in some ways that you have an ability to get into sort of the discontented mind. And it got me wondering about the woman that you are, that can actually get into this level of darkness.
Darkness, as you said, discontented mind, that's really good. That's a good description. Maybe it's to do with the fact that when I was growing up, I kept an awful lot inside. And I'm thankful that I did that, because I think that was good for me as a writer. It mightn't have been good for me as a child. And I've always been interested in looking at people, thinking, what made you into the man or the woman that you are? Because I look at somebody that, for want of a better word, despise. I mean, people don't say they despise people, but of course they do. That they despise what they do. So you look at the likes of, I don't know, Idi Amin, because when we grew up in Africa, we'd heard of Idi Amin and what happened there. You wonder what turns a person, what makes them make the decisions that they make. And deep down, you have to come to the realization that each and every one of them is a human being. And each and every one of them was a child at one point, and each and every one of them had something happen to them. So when you look at an adult nowadays and you see what they've turned out, and you can see that their mind is a wriggle of snakes, you can actually hate them for what they've turned out to be, but you can actually say to yourself, yeah, but at one point they weren't that. At one point they were somebody else. And so as a writer, I've always been interested in that journey. And the fact of the matter is, the darkness, I mean, I've had it said to me, you're such a violent writer. And, why do you seek that violence? And I seek it basically in my writing. If I can't understand it, then at least write it down, because I think it needs to be looked at. Because it'll never go away. It'll always be there, because it's part of human nature. And there's no point in demonizing it, because then you make it something not of yourself, and it's in each and every one of us. I have a dark side. The way I deal with my dark side is that I write about stuff that frightens me, because I need to be able to say, well, I faced it, and I need to make sense of whatever fear I had when I was a child, being bullied, and and also, I suppose, being sent off at the age of 7 off on your own to live in another community of girls, you tell a person that now, and they say, well, how did you manage that? And I said, well, basically my parents said I had to do it, so I did it. This is the way it was. So it's made me fiercely independent, and that's something that I always treasure in myself, and it's made me stand over my work. Like, I don't write pretty things. I accept that, because unpretty things frighten me, and I need to know what it is that frightens me, so I need to deal with it.
Orla, I'm trying to figure out, or maybe I could be wrong on this, but it sounds to me as though in some element of your writing is therapeutic for you, the way you describe it there. When you decide, and you've said this to me before, that you discipline yourself to actually sit yourself down and to be there and to begin the writing process, and that's how you as the writer operate every day, or most days. What does it feel like when you're having your breakfast and you know the time is coming where you're going to have to sit down and you're going to have to sit there for X number of hours and you're going to have to confront the fears that you talk about?
Well, you see, I take a great deal of succour in the characters, because I say to them, well, it's going to sound slightly weird, I say to them, it's your story. Yes, you come out of me, but you come out of me fully formed in your own clothes and with your own hair, and it's your story. So you tell me what it is. I don't start anything until I hear something in my head. I mean, some writers would just write and hope they come up with it. Whereas I have to hear this voice in my head, otherwise my writing is screwed for the day. If I don't hear it, then once I hear it, then I know I'm on my way with the book. But I've written stuff without that voice, without that kind of click in my head, without that character talking, and technically it's good, but there's no emotion there.
It's like in some ways that the essence of who you are isn't actually coming out. What's that like though, when you're not hearing the voice?
Oh, that's hell on earth. I hate it. I mean, and I hate to sound like tormented artist. But it is hell on earth, because I know that's how I write. Other writers, perhaps they have different ways of dealing with it. With me, it's sort of like a deal that I do with my unconscious, or, the writer in me said, I'm turning up at 8 o'clock in the morning. By God, you better be there, because if you're not, I am going to be frustrated as hell, And I have sat at my desk for 4 hours and not done anything. But my thinking is that you have to be ready. It's like, I think Ernest Hemingway said, you just turn up, And like when I know when I write shit, because I know it, and it gets screwed up and it gets thrown away because it's not good enough. It's when I can feel myself moving with the characters, and when I can hear their voices, when I can hear the rhythm of their story, then I know I'm on my way, I have a bit of a taskmaster in me as well, and would say, no, you have to get this done. And on the days that it doesn't happen, which I really hate, I have to go off for a walk, or I have to go off and do something else. And there are mornings when I really just don't like the thought of going up to the desk or going up to the table and sitting down. And I have my mug of coffee and a huge big glass of water. And that's how I'm sorted. And I just sit there from 8 until 12 or 1 or whatever the hell, and I work. And if I can't work at that, then I do a reading, or I try and do something, or I go for a walk, as I said, and come back. I hate those moments. I find those moments very difficult to deal with, but you need to go through them, because I think it's a way of proving yourself to the idea that, yes, you're willing to wait, you're willing to let things kind of fester inside of you, or gestate inside of you, whichever way you want to look at it, and then it'll come out when it's ready. But it's the waiting and it's the believing in it that I find sometimes a bit difficult. But then, you look at what you're only as good as what you've written last, which is something I always keep in my mind. And then you see, in this day and age, when you write a book, and mine was well received, which I'm supremely thankful for, even though I knew it was good, because you kind of know yourself if you're writing good stuff. At least it's true to you. In this day and age, especially in the book world, you get a book out and it's got good enough reviews, and then you're asked for your next book. Like, when are we getting your next book? Which doesn't suit me. I've learned to my cost. Do you know what I mean? Because I find that I think I'm not so much a slow writer, it's just that things need to gestate in me before I can then get down. Like with Bellios, it took me 2 years to but then I wrote it in 3 months. Do you know what I mean? So this is, it's my modus, my way of writing, I think. And it comes out in a rush. And I think that's part of my nature, as when I was little, I keep everything in, and then it comes out in some way, it has to come out in some way. So with me, it's my writing, I have everything in here and in my head, and then when I hear the voice, it's then there again, I know.
I'm just trying to figure out, is that a way that you still operate, purposely now maybe, as opposed to having less choices when you were a child? When there's stuff happening to you in your life, are you inclined to keep it in for the sake of the writer? Or do you in some way behave in a way like that just lets it out no matter what or where or when?
No, I'm far too polite. If something happens to me that I don't like, or somebody says something to me that I don't like, then I either ignore them completely and never speak to them again, which is like real passive aggressive, I suppose, or I will actually say something, and I'll just say, look, it depends on how I feel at the time. If I do come up against somebody that I find just isn't amenable to me, or that they have, I usually just avoid them, because I think, life's too short, unless now if they say something that really gets me, then I will go for them. But I will do it in a very polite way. And there have been times where I've just stepped back and bit my lip and said, no, I won't. Things that make me angry are things that I see going on in the world, and whatever is going on, if I can't actually say out, if I can't actually voice it, then I use it later. I use it, I suppose, in my work in a way. Whatever feelings it generates in me. I'm not a pushover, but I am a quiet person. And I have been a pushover, and I have been too timid for my own good sometimes. But I think I've been very, very lucky in that I've been very, very lucky in the way that my mum brought me up never to be afraid of being different. And she said it to all of us. And she also said another thing, put a price on your head. And I think that's very important for anybody. You put a price on your head. And that's what I've always done in my whole entire life. So I may be a quiet person, but I know what's good for me and what's not good for me, and I always go by those rules. In writing, it's slightly different. In writing, I go with what scares me. And in my life too, certain times, yes, because how else are you going to grow? But I think you have a little bit more leeway in writing, whereas, you can see things a little bit. And in a way, you are the god of your universe in your writing, but also then the characters take over, and then you're onto something.
If I was to have somebody that you have lived with previously, male or female, sitting here with us in the interview, and I was to say, okay, we're going to put a gag on Orla now at the moment, and we're going to ask you, what is it like to live with Orla? What do you think they'd say?
I think they'd say they'd get through it. I think they'd say that my moods could be a little bit hard to take, because, when I'm writing, I'm very much in my own world. And if things aren't going well, that's when my frustration really shows. So I'm not behind the door. I'm not quiet with my frustration. So my moods would be a bit difficult. But then they would say they'd have great fun too, because I can talk about anything, and I enjoy other people's company. I think also they would say I was quiet was another thing, because which always amazes me, because I'm not really quiet inside, but that's the persona I give off. That's what I give off. Family-wise, they'll just say, oh, well, Orla's a writer.